Landsman, left face. Forward, march.
In a forest grove not far from the nation's capital,
For God.
For God.
For country.
For country.
a group of men and women gather.
For race.
For race.
For clan.
For clan.
As the light fades, they enact a ritual over a century old, but as fresh and searing as the flame they ignite.
Landsman, the fiery cross.
A cross on fire. They are known as the Invisible Empire for a reason. They thrive in secrecy, almost never permitting outsiders access.
But time and time again in my research, I come, well, eye to eye with something that's even hard for me to believe. And that's that the elite, again, the so-called establishment kings, those that know best, the visions of the anointed ones, are obsessed with the occult. From presidents to governors to the heads of industry. We've all seen the stories of presidents and first ladies obsessed with their astrologers making national policy decisions upon their recommendations. Spiritual guides, shamans in the White House. My friends, it gets far worse than that. Now, I personally am a Christian, but even an atheist should be concerned about the information we're about to bring forward in this new documentary film, The Dark Secrets Inside Bohemian Grove. You see, for over 120-plus years in Northern California, in Sonoma County, on a 2,700-acre secluded redwood grove.
It is nestled among the redwoods, 2,700 acres of pristine land, broken down into dozens of camps. And for 2 weeks every July since the 1880s, they've been filled with some of the most wealthy and powerful men in the world.
Leaders from around the world, prime ministers, chancellors, presidents, governors, again, the heads of industry, banking, academia, the media, Hollywood. Only a select few, a little over 2,000 people, travel there to engage in bizarre, ancient Canaanite, Luciferian, Babylon mystery religion ceremonies.
Now this is a place, a notorious place in America for those that have investigated this elite connection to satanic rituals and what have you, called Bohemian Grove. It's 75 miles north of San Francisco, and it's in 2,700 acres of redwood forest. Go down there, eventually you get to it. And every year in July, the elite of America, we're talking the Kissingers and the Rockefellers and the Bushes, and all these people that control the media and the banking and the transnational corporations, they arrive at Bohemian Grove for a summer camp to let the cares of the world drop from their shoulders.
That was the rumors. And so I went to the library and got on the internet and saw many of the mainstream news articles admitting that world leaders do indeed go there, and they fly into San Francisco and other surrounding cities and drive out into the rural hills and mountains of Northern California.
Many of them arrive on their corporate jets at the nearby Sonoma County Airport. Others arrive in fancy cars, which will fill the on-site parking lot. At its height, there is said to be more than 2,000 men who attend, and as you can imagine, they are well protected by a trove of police.
Yeah. All right. Arnold Schwarzenegger showing up to the Bohemian Grove. Motorcade, he's late.
This is private property.
Yeah, I know. So we're out covering the protest, and we just wanted to see if there was anyone
I would
that
like
could
you
give
guys
us...
to get off the property, please.
There's no way we could just
not
get an
at all.
escort?
Not at all, and I'll have the police come and arrest you if you don't leave, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Access is by invitation only, and most pay more than $15,000 to attend.
By the turn of the century, there was already a 10 to 15-year waiting list. Presidents from Howard Taft to Herbert Hoover were on the membership roster. Not to mention, later, famous war general Dwight D. Eisenhower, later to become president. The roster of the Bohemian Club reads like a who's who of the elite. Look at this photo taken inside the Grove back in 1963. There you'll see Ronald Reagan. And sitting 2 people over from him, later to become president, Richard Milhouse Nixon. Frankly, we don't know if these men actively enjoy the things that go on inside the Bohemian Club. But one thing is perfectly certain from the evidence. They are forced to go and attend and take part in these activities if they wish to be elevated to the highest levels of the geopolitical power structure. Take George Bush Sr., documented member. And then, of course, there's his son. Now, the last 4 generations of Bushes have also attended the Skull and Bones Society at Yale, well known to be steeped in the occult. Then there's Bill Clinton, a frequent attendee. Upon closer inspection, the entire federal government at the highest levels is infested with Bohemian Club members. And it doesn't stop there. America's private run-for-profit Federal Reserve Bank, from its very inception in 1913, has been run by prominent members of the Bohemian Club. Central Bank Chairman Alan Greenspan was seen leaving the Bohemian Grove only 1 month before he was appointed chairman of the Federal Reserve. He had to be a made man to be a member of the most powerful cabal on the planet.
For more than 35 years, protesters have stood at the entrance gates.
Our concern is not what's going on inside of the Grove, but what's happening outside of the Grove with the people that are in here.
According to several reports, this is where the idea for the Manhattan Project was conceived back in 1942. It's also where every Republican president since the 60s has spent time before actually becoming the nominee.
Historical records are clear from major universities. The Manhattan Project was planned and instituted and run from the Bohemian Club. All of this going on in an atmosphere of bizarre revelry. You're looking at an illustration from a November 1989 issue of Spy magazine. Spy goes undercover with Henry Kissinger, Merv Griffin, and William F. Buckley Jr. The story was clearly a shill, meant to misdirect the intensifying media coverage that the Grove was getting in the late 1980s. The writer's spin is obvious. They're just masters of the universe, big frat boys blowing off steam. We'll get back to this article later, because you can clearly see that the mantra in the spin story has been picked up as a front by all the local media. Sure, they're elitist. Sure, they have some bizarre rituals, but what's the big deal? They're just having fun.
We know for sure that Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan sat down and had conversation about who was going to run for president when, and they made a deal.
Peter Phillips wrote his dissertation on the Bohemian Club in 1994 and was invited to attend for 4 days. He witnessed firsthand the opening event, the cremation of care, where the power elite leave their cares behind in a symbolic ceremony beneath Moloch the owl, seen in this photo.
Now, this was a picture taken on a long lens by a journalist who got into Bohemian Grove some years ago. It's much clearer on the original. Going through the computer, it, kind of clouds it a bit, to say the least. But this is a 40-foot stone frickin' owl. And over here are all the Bohemian Grovers observing this opening ritual. Now, the real deal, as the people I've talked to over the years have told me, goes on in smaller groups of elite in the forest during the rest of the week. But this is the opening ritual, called the cremation of care, where they say they're burning their cares away and all that stuff.
These stories have been coming out that they worship some 45-foot stone owl god. And then I began to read some of the documentation on this Moloch character of the Old Testament, mentioned many times in Leviticus. That's in the Bible. Why are world leaders traveling to the middle of nowhere to worship this thing? Well, I had to check it out for myself.
Jed Jankel says he was a paid employee of the Grove and drove the horse and buggy that carried the casket in the ceremony.
The casket represented their cares, and they would actually burn it.
This is a place filled with secrets that only those who go inside and perhaps the trees will ever really know. But I was able to get my hands on some photographs that I want to show you just to give you a sense on what it looks like on the inside. This is a photograph of people who attend. As we mentioned, it is all men, and this is a photograph of some of them. This here was taken back in 1999. Colin Powell, the back of Donald Rumsfeld's head. And this is Thomas Keane. 2 years later, he would become head of the 9/11 Commission. Here's a picture. Newt Gingrich, Henry Kissinger's son, and another shot of Thomas Keane.
Here's a much younger Dick Cheney at the Grove, and Henry Kissinger having a little fun. I was also able to get my hands on several programs from previous years, outlining the schedule of talks and their topics.
And what we have here on July 22nd, 2008 is the Lakeside Talk given by CFR member and Trilateral Commission member Fred Starr. He gave a talk called Afghanistan, the Unexpected Upside.
There are other connections to be made as well between the Lakeside Talks and public policies that follow.
This was a man that was involved in the oil business, George Linkowitz, the Persian Gulf crisis. This is 1980. Caspar Weinberger, who was the Secretary of Defense in the Reagan administration on rearming America. And that's easily documented. The arms buildup came in around late 81, 82.
There are rumors of extreme drunkenness, of prostitutes, and of homosexual activities by members. But for the most part, it is the secret backroom agreements critics say should be brought to light.
That agreement can be, occupying the Middle East, fighting terrorism, encircling China politically and militarily.
For Mary Moore, who's been researching Bohemian Grove for more than 3 decades, what happens inside is symptomatic of a much larger problem.
We've all grown up taking civics, trying to understand how the world works, and we're all told that we elect representatives, they go to Washington, we have total influence over them, and they make decisions that are in the best interests of us. Then we start growing up, and if we pay any kind of attention, we find out that none of that is true.
In Monterey, California, Christine Frizzell, RT.
It's hard to even describe it with words, and I hope that our hidden cameras can give you at least a small piece of what I witnessed. To have world leaders engaging in this type of sickening behavior. Oh yes, there's much more to come. Mock human sacrifices, they claim, just shocks the very foundations of what Americans believe their leaders to be.
Grasping the fact that people were involved in human sacrifice ceremonies and stuff back in the ancient world, okay, get my head around that. The fact even that some really kind of imbalanced people could be doing it today, yep, get me head around that. What really hit me was the scale at which this goes on, and some of the most famous people on this planet are involved in it. And Satanism, just a word for human sacrifice and other deeply dark rituals.
And then to have it intimately connected with world government. It doesn't make a lot of sense until you research history. All throughout history, spanning back into the mist of the beginnings of civilization, we see world leaders from the empires of old, from the Aztec kings and priests, to Babylonian leaders, to ancient Rome, engaging in twisted behaviors.
Why would David Gergen, presidential advisor to President Clinton, resign from the Bohemian Club and 17 other organizations when it was revealed in 1993? Organizations like the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg Group. But it's not just the Washington Times and the Sacramento Bee. You're looking at an illustration from the pages of Parade magazine, February 22nd, 1981. This story was the most accurate and revealing, detailing the so-called mock human sacrifice. Former German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt wrote extensively in his memoirs, Men and Powers, a political retrospective, goes into great detail about the secret establishment running the world, the Trilateral Commission, the CFR, the Bilderberg Group, and of course, ladies and gentlemen, the Bohemian Grove, a place that he often talked about being a wonderful hideaway, a place to spend time with Nelson and David Rockefeller, and to talk about world government and steering societies. On page 225 of Men and Powers, he talks about it being one of the most astounding places he had ever visited in the United States, and how that feeling intensified over the years with subsequent visits. The book goes on for page after page discussing the corporate, private, governmental infrastructure of world government. Going back to the Spy magazine spin piece, they have lots of rosy illustrations of drunken establishment types dancing around having fun with the rituals going on in the background. They even admit that they wear bizarre Ku Klux Klan-style robes. And there's even a photo released by the Grove of the ritual being engaged in. They talk about the incredible security surrounding the Grove. And they even admit that a corpse, a sacrifice, is born across the lake. But it's all good fun.
And long before global government came out in the open, in the last 4 or 5 years, they were conditioning the public that anyone that talks about global government is a kook, a weirdo, a terrorist, a racist. And now they're out on the nightly news saying global government's here, you better accept it, we're getting rid of juries all across the planet. The IMF, the World Bank, basically runs things now. The WTO decides what you can buy and sell and trade on the international market. But see, they've preconditioned us that it doesn't exist. They've preconditioned us that anybody that talks about this stuff and who is against it is a kook or a racist because it doesn't exist. And then everybody's decided, well, I'm going to be culturally cool. I want to be in style. I want to be accepted. So even when they're hearing the news admit it and tell us how great it is, they've already pre-positioned it psychologically that it's not acceptable, it's not kosher to discuss it. Do you see the tactic they're using there?
Here's just one of many signs sporting French with skulls adorned with other trappings of death. We also saw signage with Latin and other ancient languages. Now we're about to let you see a little bit of what's going on with the great owl. Now, this is the only skull we actually caught on tape. We've blown it up for you over one of the major meeting houses. Of course, it's not a real skull. It was extremely oversized up on the signage. The point we're trying to make here is the entire compound was literally infested with symbols of death, skulls, owls. At long last, here it is, the cremation of care. We sat there in the darkness, not knowing what we were about to see in the gathering crowd. Suddenly, across the small lake, we saw a carriage with men in black and brown cloaks, robes, in front and in back, bearing a bound body. Remember, it was a hidden camera and at somewhat of an angle. Something particularly pleasing was happening for the Bohemian Grovers with whatever developed with that crowd of men in black and brown and the bound body on the back of the buggy. They drove behind big black tarps they had hanging out of the trees.
The casket represented their cares, and they would actually burn it.
There was lots of smacking on lips of in bizarre enjoyment by the crowd. We still haven't made out exactly what was going on, but that a real sacrifice may have actually been developing, according to some occult experts. All the time in the darkness across the small lake, the men in black were doing something behind the dark curtains hanging from the redwood trees. Then after about 10 more minutes of music, suddenly all around the owl, activity began. Here is the main central part of the ritual.
The owl is in his leafy temple. Let all within the grove be reverent before him. hope, their eyes answer. Blow all the memories of yesterday and seal the gates of sorrow. It is a dream, and yet not all a dream. Joel Kerr and all of his works are but a dream. As vanished Babylon and goodly Tyre, so shall they also vanish. But the wilding rose blows on the broken battlements of Tyre, and walks rend the stones of Babylon. For beauty is eternal, and we bow to beauty everlasting. For lasting happiness, return to one alone, and she surrounds you now. Great nature, refuge of the weary heart, and only balm for breasts that have been bruised. Ye have cool hands for every favorite brow, and gentlest silence for the troubled soul. The counsels are most wise.
Here you have the boatman, his face was painted up like a skull, bringing the bound body across the water. Again, we'll have enhanced video of this later. And let's see if you can pick up all of the different occultic meanings in the speeches you're about to hear.
O thou, thus buried across the shadowy tide, all the ancient majesty of death. Thou arch enemy of beauty. Not for thee that has been tribute or the restful grave. Fire shall have its will of thee, and all the winds make merry with thy dust. Bring fire!
When will ye learn that me ye cannot slay? Year after year ye burn me in this grove, lifting your puny shouts of triumph to the stars. But when again ye turn your faces to the marketplace, do ye not find me waiting as of old? Fools to dream ye conquer care.
Nay, thou mocking spirit, it is not all a dream. We know thou waitest for us, when this our sylvan holiday has ended. We shall meet thee and fight thee as of old, and some of us prevail against thee, and some thou shalt destroy. But this too we know. Year after year within this happy grove, our fellowship bans thee for a space. Thy malevolence which would pursue us here has lost its power under these friendly trees. So shall we burn thee once again this night, and in the flames that eat thine effigy, we shall read the sign, Midsummer sets us free.
Ye shall burn me again! Not with these flames, which hither ye have brought from regions where I reign. Ye fools and priests, I spit upon your fire.
Wow. Great son of all mortal wisdom, thou of Bohemia, we beseech thee, grant us thy counsel. Begone, dull care. Fire! shall have its will of thee. Begone, old care, and all the winds make merry with thy dust. Hail, fellowship's eternal flame. Once again, midsummer sets us free.
Upon further research of the ritual you just witnessed, it becomes clear. It is a mixture of the Babylonian Canaanite cult of Moloch fused with ancient Druidic rites where you have the female side of Satan, which they first call out to in the she, and then towards the horn god with the he, mixed with Masonic rites from Scotland. It's very likely that many of the 1,500 to 2,000 member crowd had really no idea what they were actually watching because it was thinly veiled. Remember PJ, the little demon down in the corner, the left-hand corner of the program, sweeping up the ashes with little horns? And how can you forget this, the image of a human body burning on the altar? Again, this is what they were handing out to those that were witnessing these macabre activities. But again, from Babylon on into ancient England, the word bone fire, meaning human sacrifices being thrown into fiery pits, turned into today's bonfire. After the sacrifice, members of the cult would sweep up the ashes of the victim and use them in future rituals. One of the things that is extremely obvious by looking at the program handed out to Bohemian Club members is the person creating the program had a deep understanding of the occult. There you see the funeral pyre burning with the effigy of a human, or it could be real, ladies and gentlemen. There's been a lot of strange going-ons in that area of Northern California, but this is what the establishment is into right here in America, the cremation of care. And this was July 15th, 2000.
Over here, all these people in bloody robes carrying out this Babylonian-type ceremony. Now, the 40-foot stone owl, these are the people who are running our freaking world. These are the people coming on CNN and what have you, and BBC and ITN telling us what should happen and what's going to happen.
One of the facets of the ritual that goes deeply into the occult, again, we've already mentioned the Druids at their bonfires or bonfires throwing bodies into fiery pits after ritually cutting their hearts out or slitting their throats. They talk about reading the sign in the burning effigy, reading the sign. Again, research your history books on the occult, even the Encyclopedia Britannica on what the Druids would engage in. This is just unbelievably macabre and evil. I would only hope that the people of the world realize the organized evil we're dealing with at almost every level. Republican, Democrat, you name it. They're all working on the same team. Ladies and gentlemen, it's called world government, the New World Order, dehumanization. It's not a joke. It's deadly serious. Unfortunately, they've been breeding societies to think everything's a joke. I'm here to tell you truth is stranger than fiction.
Front group after front group to conceal and really subvert. But behind all of these groups, there is a small cadre or elite, a core. And what you have done, I think, with the Bohemian Grove is you have exposed one of the premier organizations of the whole New World Order arrangement, you might say. Of course, we can go back in history, all the way back to ancient Egypt, Babylon, or Greece, Rome. And I think you're going to see sort of the roots of the Bohemian Grove, but particularly in the Illuminati era, originating during the French Revolutionary days. You know, there we had the actual order of the Illuminati, with Adam Weishaupt and all of his evil philosophers, let's just call them, Voltaire and the others. And that has come up all the way to today. Hitler, of course, was a Bohemian. I think it's more Babylon mystery religion. All of the elements are there. Of course, even the owl is a symbol of ancient mystery Babylon. The owl was worshipped by the ancient Egyptians and by the Babylonians. And it's interesting to me that many of the members of the Bohemian Grove have in their homes, as I understand it, small figurines of owls. And I believe they actually worship those owls as a symbol of the deity, the great goddess of Babylon. I think all of those things, there had to be, in my belief, an occultist, a deep occultist, who designed each of the elements of this ceremony. It wasn't just a bunch of guys sit together at a bar and said, hey, let's have a good time, the cremation of care, and why don't we do this or that. I believe it was purposely designed, each element in its turn, for what they did.
I mean, we're here. We're at global government now. When they're saying they're going to have some world court in the Netherlands that they'll take anybody they want to. These are in fact, I was reading some of the talks that they've given and they've released that the Bohemian Grove has discussed, and it's all population control, world courts. You're talking 20 years ago. So definitely some stuff's going on. Could it be that when you have all the power and all the women and all the money and all the lands and all the art, you have to do something new? You have to go against the basic grain of humanity. You have to get off in a sick way. That's what we witnessed in Northern California, July 15th, 2000.
I always hear there's like big, fat, rich guys with prostitutes there.
Really?
Yeah.
What about the owl and the rituals?
I don't know anything about it.
Never heard about the rituals?
Rituals.
Ritual killing of a human, sacrifice of a human?
Nope. Never heard of it.
What would you think if that was going on?
I think it's pretty weird. Wouldn't be that surprised. I mean, it is our government after all.
Let's look at Northern California. You understand? Yeah. You know what's happening in San Francisco is just gone. It's clear over. I understand, but it isn't just down in the ratty part of town. But the upper class in San Francisco is that way. The Bohemian Grove that I attend, one time at a time, the Easterners and the others that come there. But it is the most faggy goddamn thing you will ever imagine in San Francisco crowd. It's just terrible. I mean, I never want to shake hands with anybody in San Francisco.
Yeah. A fraud? No, it wasn't a fraud, but I'll be glad to talk to you if you'll shut up and let me talk now. And a fraud, let me tell you something. I'll tell you a couple of stories about fraud. The Bohemian Club, as you say, the Bohemian Club? That's where all those rich Republicans go up and stand naked against redwood trees, right? I've never been to the Bohemian Club, but you ought to go. It'd be good for you. Get some fresh air.
We ran into David Gergen, the Karl Rove of 4 presidential administrations. Okay, one last question. I read a Washington Times article many years ago where you had a comment about the organization, and then now it's been in the Wall Street Journal, it's been in a lot of different newspapers, and that's the Bohemian Grove. And back in, 1996, when you joined as a Clinton advisor, the Republicans were criticizing you, oh, what about Bohemian Grove? And then you countered them by saying, hey, I don't run around in the woods naked. What did that mean? Here is the before-mentioned Washington Times article where he said, I didn't run around naked like they do.
I don't know what quote you're referring to. I'm not aware of any quote like that. Listen, I am a happy member of the Bohemian Grove. I like the folks who come there, and it's really inappropriate for me to talk about the group beyond that. Thank you.
Have you been there for the ceremony with the cremation of care?
Frankly, I don't think that's something I need to talk to you about.
Really?
That's right.
Well, I'm Alex Jones, and I snuck in there in 2000. I'm the guy that blew it wide open and got the video. It's been on national TV.
Well, I disrespect you for that.
You do?
I do.
But it's a lot of big public officials going in there. Don't we deserve to know?
You took I don't know anything about you, and I don't know anything about your film. But if you go in there with an understanding, you violated that understanding by releasing that film, and I don't respect you for that.
Really? But we have public officials.
I'm sorry. You took an understanding when you went in there that you would not do that film. And did you have an understanding when you went in there?
No.
Did you crash it?
Yes.
Yeah, and it has no trespassing signs there too, doesn't it?
No, they put them up after.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just walked in.
I'm sorry, sir. I've been there before. I know what the circumstances are, and I'm sorry you violated the understandings. That was not a gentlemanly thing to do.
But what about the ritual? Is the ritual gentlemanly?
Sir, everything. I don't owe you this comment.
I know. I appreciate it.
This is what's called ambush journalism, and I disrespect you for that as well. So thank you
ever
and goodbye.
Been in the ritual?
It's none of your damn business.
Oh,
that's right. Listen. You go around and make understandings with people and violate them. You ambush people on the streets, and that's inappropriate form of journalism. If you wish to practice that, that's fine, but don't ask others to respect you for it. If you want to, you can do. You're free American, like anything you want. If you want to be uncivil and rude and ungentlemanly, that's up to you. But don't expect the rest of us to say, "Oh well, you're
there, Mr. Gergen."
I'm sorry, nobody sets policy in there. We try to be gentlemen, and obviously, you don't belong there.
Weaving spiders come out here.
Now, what you hear very clearly on this tape, whatever the background, is when they set fire to this effigy body, you hear a blood-curdling, bloody scream. Now, one of two things are happening here. Either they're actually doing it to somebody, or they've actually put a blood-curdling scream on the tape to blast out as part of the ritual. Either way, these are the people running our world and deciding to bomb Iraq or Kabul or anywhere they frickin' choose.
Others arrive in fancy cars, which will fill the on-site parking lot. At its height, there is said to be more than 2,000 men who attend, and as you can imagine, they are well protected by a trove of police.
All right. Arnold Schwarzenegger showing up to the Bohemian Grove. Motorcade, he's late.
This is private property.
Yeah, I know. So we're out covering the protest, and we just wanted to see if there was anyone
I would
that could
like you
give
guys
us...
to get off the property, please.
There's no way we could just get an escort?
No, not at all, and I'll have the police come and arrest you if you don't leave, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Access is by invitation only, and most pay more than $15,000 to attend.
By the turn of the century, there was already a 10 to 15-year waiting list. Presidents from Howard Taft to Herbert Hoover were on the membership roster. Not to mention, later, famous war general Dwight D. Eisenhower, later to become president. The roster of the Bohemian Club reads like a who's who of the elite. Look at this photo taken inside the Grove back in 1963. There you'll see Ronald Reagan, and sitting two people.
Landsman, left face. Forward, march.
In a forest grove not far from the nation's capital,
For God. For God. For country. For country.
a group of men and women gather.
For race. For race. For clan. For clan.
As the light fades, they enact a ritual over a century old, but as fresh and searing as the flame they ignite.
Landsman, the fiery cross.
A cross on fire. They are known as the Invisible Empire for a reason. They thrive in secrecy, almost never permitting outsiders access.
But time and time again in my research, I come, well, Hollywood. Only a select few, a little over 2,000 people, travel there to engage in bizarre, ancient Canaanite, Luciferian, Babylon mystery religion ceremonies.
Now this is a place, a notorious place in America for those that have investigated this elite connection to satanic rituals and what have you, called Bohemian Grove. It's 75 miles north of San Francisco, and it's in 2,700 acres of redwood forest. Go down there, eventually you get to it. And every year in July, the elite of America, we're talking the Kissingers and the Rockefellers and the Bushes, and all these people that control the media and the banking and the transnational corporations, they arrive at Bohemian Grove for a summer camp to let the cares of the world drop from their shoulders.
That was the rumors. And so I went to the library and got on the internet and saw many of the mainstream news articles admitting that world leaders do indeed go there, and they fly into San Francisco and other surrounding cities and drive out into the rural hills and mountains of Northern California.
Many of them arrive on their corporate jets at the nearby Sonoma County Airport.
Eye to eye with something that's even hard for me to believe. And that's that the elite, again, the so-called establishment kings, those that know best, the visions of the anointed ones, are obsessed with the occult. From presidents to governors to the heads of industry. We've all seen the stories of presidents and first ladies obsessed with their astrologers making national policy decisions upon their recommendations. Spiritual guides, shamans in the White House. My friends, it gets far worse than that. Now, I personally am a Christian, but even an atheist should be concerned about the information we're about to bring forward in this new documentary film, The Dark Secrets Inside Bohemian Grove. You see, for over 120-plus years in Northern California, in Sonoma County, on a 2,700-acre secluded redwood grove.
It is nestled among the redwoods, 2,700 acres of pristine land, broken down into dozens of camps. And for 2 weeks every July since the 1880s, they've been filled with some of the most wealthy and powerful men in the world.
Leaders from around the world, prime ministers, chancellors, presidents, governors, again, the heads of industry, banking, academia, the media.
Over from him, later to become president, Richard Milhous Nixon. Frankly, we don't know if these men actively enjoy the things that go on inside the Bohemian Club. But one thing is perfectly certain from the evidence. They are forced to go and attend and take part in these activities if they wish to be elevated to the highest levels of the geopolitical power structure. Take George Bush Sr., documented member. And then, of course, there's his son. Now, the last 4 generations of Bushes have also attended the Skull and Bones Society at Yale, well known to be steeped in the occult. Then there's Bill Clinton, a frequent attendee. Upon closer inspection, the entire federal government at the highest levels is infested with Bohemian Club members. And it doesn't stop there. America's private run-for-profit Federal Reserve Bank, from its very inception in 1913, has been run by prominent members of the Bohemian Club. Central Bank Chairman Alan Greenspan was seen leaving the Bohemian Grove only 1 month before he was appointed chairman of the Federal Reserve. He had to be a made man to be a member of the most powerful cabal on the planet.
For more than 35 years, protesters have stood at the entrance gates.
Our concern is not what's going on inside of the Grove, but what's happening outside of the Grove.